That's half a door.
This light. It's so funny. This light is sort of blinding me. It's it's very crime-like, actually. Okay. Right. All right, then, here we go. So, welcome to this afternoon presentation. My name is Akky van Ogtrop. I'm the curator for the paper part of this art fair. And I'm also the president of the Print Council. Very, very important organization, so please keep that in mind. I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to the elders, both past and present. Now, I have actually the pleasure to introduce you to a crime figure. Guest speaker, Vicky Olivieri. Vicky is a PhD candidate at the University of New England, and it's the School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Science, isn't it? And she's examining domestic and international issues of art crime and cultural heritage protection. Her PhD research project includes investigating Australian public galleries that acquired, this is a word I can't say, allegedly or allergy, I don't know.
Allegedly?
Yeah.
To say allegedly, I'll get sued, so it's okay.
That's it. And that's looted Indian antiquities. She is also researching the destruction of the Juukan Gorge caves by Rio Tinto, a site sacred to the First Nations people in the Pilbara region of Western Australia. By analyzing the factors that led to these events, Vicky hopes to identify practical strategies to enhance cultural heritage protection. But so, how did Vicky become involved in a career of arts crime? She mentions in her biography that it started during her Bachelor of Arts study and a wish to be surrounded by things of beauty. She said, "I did a unit on art crime and I was hooked."
I should just add in there and say, I don't commit art crime. I just like to research it because every time it sounds like I'm behind the scenes trying to steal the stuff.
She's got somewhere there.
No, I'm dressed like I could.
Anyway, it later occurred to her that she had transitioned from wanting to surround herself with things of beauty to wanting to protect them. And that really is what motivates her research. How can we protect our collective cultural heritage? So, Vicky will keep you spellbound with her stories about masterpieces cut from their frames. A Dutch masterpiece goes missing from a major public gallery. Crimes of opportunity? Was it organized crime or something else? Welcome to the shadowy world of art crime, where truth is stranger than fiction. So please welcome Vicky.
Thank you. And I certainly appreciate you all coming here on a Sunday afternoon, so I hope I can entertain you with some of these cases. So let's start. I get a bit excited, so you have to wave at me if I'm talking too fast, okay? All right, so unsolved art thefts. So I guess I should start by saying that in reality, a lot of art thefts do remain unsolved. The FBI states that stolen art, the recovery rate of stolen art can be as low as 2 to 6%, and the world's largest private database for stolen art also says that it's a low rate, but also interesting, and I'll talk about one of these recovered paintings later in the talk. 15% of those sort of the high value works do get recovered around 25 years or so later, for some weird reason. Also to so Italy's police force, they claim to recover around 30% of lost art, but they're an interesting case because they set up a specialised art crime unit in 1969. Because you think about Italy, you're kind of walking amongst masterpieces, aren't you, amongst ancient ruins, and practically every church could double as a museum because of all the artwork in there, because back in the day it was either the churches or the wealthy people who commissioned art. So they were just seeing so much stuff being stolen that they established this art crime unit, and so they have, it's the biggest one in the world really, and so they devote a lot of officers to trying to recover the art. But when you think about the low recovery rate, Interpol's stolen artworks database has about over 52,000 stolen pieces listed on that database. So if you're talking about a 2 to 6% recovery rate, it's probably around 1,000 to 3,000 artworks being recovered. So because of this lack of, this low recovery rate, it can be hard to kind of know, well, who's doing this and why? I know there are obvious answers to that, but to get to the more specific details. And of course, here in Australia, we don't have a specialised art crime unit. And here, as in other countries, often stolen art is grouped into just property, just as part of property crime. So it's not actually, there isn't like a specific category. So it can be really hard to get data on knowing how much is stolen. So that makes it really challenging then for governments and for scholars and for law enforcement agencies to kind of get a true picture on what's happening. And this is certainly the case with the cases, double words, that I'll be looking at today. So the first one, I'll be looking at a whole collection of Grace Cottington Smith's artworks that were stolen 45 years ago. There were 28 just gone, never been recovered. And then probably the most well-known art heist, because it's one of the biggest, because of the value of the pieces stolen, is Boston's Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And there's been a few documentaries done on that, so it's more well-known. And then I'll be looking at a painting that disappeared from the Art Gallery of New South Wales, a Cavalry self-portrait. That's 15 years ago in June that it was stolen, not recovered. And then finally, because Akky, with the Print Council, I'm looking at some prints that were stolen. The famous, a set of the famous Andy Warhol Campbell Soup prints. Okay, so that's what we'll be looking at. All right, so let's go to Grace Cottington Smith. Okay, so usually the media spotlight falls on certain art crimes. And I guess I should explain too that I'm looking at one type of art crime, which is art theft. Art crime can also be art being vandalised, it can be fakes and frauds, it can be cultural heritage or art that's destroyed in conflict. So there's a whole range of things within that banner of art crime, but I'm looking at art theft. So the Grace Cottington Smith theft. So it was 1977, and she'd recently had opened an exhibition at the now defunct. I was decided not to. I was going to not use that word in case it sounded like something else. But there used to be these galleries called Macquarie Galleries in Sydney, and Grace Cottington Smith held a number of exhibitions there. But by the time 1977 came around, she hadn't really been doing a lot of painting. So she was drawing on some older material. And just to show you Grace Cottington Smith, she's probably most well known for the sock knitter. Who's seen that one at the Art Gallery of New South Wales? It's one of my favourites because she made this in 1915, so it kind of, evokes sort of ideas of just she could be knitting socks for, the soldiers on the front line of World War I. I just love this painting. It's considered quite a key picture in the modernist movement and one of the first post-impressionist works carried out by an Australian. So she's a really important figure. And so, but by the time this exhibition came around, she hadn't really been doing any new work. So a lot of the artwork on display at that exhibition was drawn from older material. Two had already been purchased by the Australian National, or the National Gallery of Australia, it was called Australian National Gallery at the time, and a couple of unis had lent some works as well. Anyway, so what happened was on the 4th of April, it was only a few days after the exhibition had opened, between about 3 or 3:20 a.m, people broke into the gallery. They reckon there was about 4 people, but around the same time, someone gave an anonymous phone call to the police. And by the time the police got there, it was 20 minutes later, all 28 paintings were gone. So This is the letter that the gallery wrote to explain that it'd been stolen, all the works had been stolen. So, and they're saying if you come across any of these works, or any Grace Cottington Smith works, and the provenance or looks a bit strange, you need to let us contact the police. So, but this was the police report, an excerpt from it, saying what happened. I loved how they decamped from in an early model. There you go, Holden sedan, maroon in colour. And at that time, they were valued at $25,000. So in 20 minutes, they stole 28 paintings. And it's really kind of unheard of for that many to be stolen at once. So it was all a bit bizarre. And so I was reading this piece by an author, Bruce James, and when talking about this collection, he said he had this to say. He said it came to represent a historical milestone, and a sorry one at that. Its significance lies not simply in the loss of paintings by an individual artist, momentous enough, but in the loss of innocence of the Australian art trade. And I think with that latter part, he's probably referring to the fact that we often don't get art thefts here in Australia compared to, say, Europe or North America, where obviously there are more masterpieces and that kind of stuff. So, and also too, it was just done in such a rough manner. They broke the glass of the doors to get in. They stole the stuff, and then it's never been recovered. And then of course, like I was saying before, how there's that lack of data. So what do you think happens? Then there's rumours, there's all these conspiracy theories. Who doesn't love a good conspiracy theory? There's some beauties with the Isabella Stewart Garden one, but we'll get to that. So some of the theories were it was a disgruntled, former employee maybe of the artist, maybe it was a jealous collector. Some were saying it could be just an inside job. And then the most outlandish one was that it was some Tokyo industrialist who stole the whole lot, and now they're adorning the walls of some, golf club or something in, mainland Japan. Who knows? But the thing is, it's 45 years this year and nothing. They've just disappeared into the ether. And of course, and that's an interesting thing, just a couple of things with art theft. See, when something is so well known, it can be hard to sell because obviously it will come to the attention of people, because often people go and get artwork valued. So, and what any good value will do is check those databases, like Interpol's one, the Art Loss Register, so it'll come up as stolen. And of course, if you're going to try to sell something that's stolen, you also then have to fake the documents that go with it to show that you have that proof of ownership. So that's a whole nother story. So some people say it's, could be sold on the black market, and if that's the case, it's usually for about 10% of its value. But it's still, a good kind of bit of money, I suppose. I guess the more expensive something is, to get 10%, it's better than nothing. So, but because this stuff isn't recovered, it's kind of hard to know. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So, just to let you know, these were the paintings. This is the titles of the paintings that were stolen. Not that I'm going to read them all out, but just gives you an idea. Like some painted in the 40s and the 30s. They only had the details for 27 of the 28 that were stolen. So when you just see the list like this, you think they're all gone. That's it. And that's the thing about, for me, researching this sort of stuff. It's just, I don't want to just, research for the sake of research, but to look at, practical ways to try to prevent or minimise this stuff from happening. And because once it's lost, it's lost. You can't replace this stuff, So those were the images, the artworks that were stolen. So, and like I said, it's been 45 years, and because we don't have a specialised art crime unit, that's it. It's a cold case, and as far as I know, nothing more's been done about it. And I guess the longer time goes by, the harder it is to find that. Okay. Oh, I was going to say, actually going back. Did I go back? Yeah. I should say that the gallery wasn't insured either. So, Grace Cottington Smith wound up taking them to court, and she then was given some compensation. But, she died 7 years later, never having seen those pieces again. All right. Well, most of you probably hadn't even heard of that art theft. I'd be surprised if you hadn't. If you have heard of it, wonderful. But a lot of people know about this one because it was such a big deal, and it still is a big deal. And unlike the Grace Cottington Smith case, it's still an active open case. The FBI have a specialised art crime team, and they've got officers who are still investigating this case, and the gallery has a director of security, Anthony Moray, and he's still investigating this case. So picture this, it's 1990, it's 18th of March, the early hours, and you know, in Boston there's a big Irish-American community, and it was St. Patrick's Day, and then the theft happened. But before I do that, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Isabella Stewart Garda, because she's really quirky. I mean, she's passed away now, obviously, but I just loved learning about her. So this is her. This is a real, obviously a photo of her, and these are two of my favourite portraits of her. She got into collecting. In a way, it was just to help her overcome the grief of losing her only child, who was just a toddler. She was bedridden, they said, for about a year, just with grief. And so finally the doctors said to her husband, you've got to take her away, just take her overseas, do something. And she always loved Italy. So she started collecting art. And then, because she just loved Venice so much, her and her husband decided to build a residence and sort of model after a Venetian palazzo. So that's what they started to do. And what was so amazing, of course, during that process, the husband passed away, so she had to deal with all this loss. So this was her way of, you know, kind of, I guess, her therapy in many ways. And what I loved reading about the whole bullying of it, she used to have a trumpeter with her, so when she came on site, the trumpeter would call everyone to attention so she could say what she had to say. So you can kind of see the courtyard, which just looks magnificent. It's on my bucket list to go there. And it's second only to the Frick Museum for the most amazing, or I guess prestigious private gallery. What's wonderful is that she bequeathed the whole residence to the city of Boston when she died. And to this day, and I checked it the other night just to make sure, if your name is Isabella, you get him for free. Any Isabellas here? You can get him for free. Isn't that amazing? Because her name was Isabella. Now, interesting, one of the things that came out when the theft happened, I'll go into more details about the theft because it's a beauty, is that people were shocked that the works weren't insured. Well, there was a reason for that. In her will, and she was a quirky lady, I'm telling you, she was ahead of her time, she stipulated that you couldn't add to or take away from the collection. So there was no point in insuring them because, well, it had to stay just as she wanted it. So you couldn't buy a new piece of work because she didn't curate that. So, but what I loved is, you just picture this, for her, that was her home. So you had all these amazing masterpieces in a domestic setting. And you might have a dresser with a Rembrandt on it, you know, it's just incredible. And I remember reading that she had this, I think it was a green silk skirt or something that she didn't want to wear anymore, but she loved the fabric, so she hung that on the wall and then put a painting in front of it. I mean, she's just amazing, but that was her home, so we've got to remember that. So let's go to the theft. Okay, so it was early mornings, and there were two security guards on duty, and they broke a cardinal rule. They opened the door after hours. And they opened it because they thought they were opening the door to two police officers. But it soon became apparent that these were not police officers. And one of my favourite quotes is by the former curator at the nearby Boston Museum of Fine Arts. Great name. I mean, you can't make up. That's what I love about this topic. It's just, Cornelius Famil is a great name. This is what he said. He said, if a group of nuns say their van broke down and want to call their mother superior, we don't let them in. They might turn out to have Uzis under their habits. So you just don't do it. And so what happened was they drew the guards away from the only other opportunity they had to call for authorities, which was the panic button. And then they led them downstairs and they tied them all up with duct tape. This is an image of one of the security guards. Yep. And so while they did that, it'd have to be at least a couple of, well, we know there were two officers, well, fake officers. They spent an hour and 21 minutes in that place. And how do they know this? See, the CCTV footage wasn't, I think they might have taken all the cameras weren't working, but they had motion detector cameras or whatever, and this is like a log from one of them. So the different names you see, like the Dutch room, they're just like different rooms within the museum. So an hour and 21 minutes, and they stole 13 pieces, quite an eclectic range, which I'll go through with you soon. And of course, amongst all those pieces, two of them really took the spotlight, which was these two. And the reason is Rembrandt, he had in his lifetime of painting probably around 2,000 works, but this was his only known seascape. He didn't do any others. This is it. And of course, for me, who's so famous, you might remember the girl, what is it, the girl with the pearl earring? So that's one of his works. He only did about 36 or so paintings in his lifetime, so every artwork of his is precious because it's such a low output. So you see Rembrandt, 2,000. For me, well, he had a lot of kids. Maybe that's why, I don't know. Anyway, so probably just those two alone are probably valued close to $500 million in today's terms. And the sad thing is, if I kind of go back to the first picture I had, where was it? See the frame? They literally cut the painting from the frames. And what the museum have done, they've left the empty frames up. It's quite poignant, really. So there's a whole range of them where you see the empty frames. They're just kind of waiting, to be reunited. So they cut them from the frames, yes.
And the frames are still...
They still keep the frames up.
Oh,
yep.
how amazing.
Yeah, I know. So we'll go back. I'm trying to get comfortable using one of these. I'm kind of not, Click, click, click. Oh, what happened? I went the wrong way. That's okay. We'll just go back this way. Just amuse yourselves for a moment. Okay. Yeah, so these two always get a lot of the attention. But these were the other works that were stolen. So there's a couple more Rembrandts. One by Manet. Oh, this one by Flink, I think that's how you say his name. Originally they thought it was a Rembrandt, but there's actually a Rembrandt research project, because if Rembrandt did all these paintings, it'd probably be about, I don't know how many thousands, so a lot of them aren't his. And they just discovered that it was a student of Rembrandt's, yeah. So a few by Degas. These often don't get the attention, And if you go to the Garda website, you can see they have a section on the theft, because it's such a big deal. It was a real wake-up call for a lot of museums in terms of their security. And this is an interesting one. It was a finial from Napoleon's, what is it? Imperial. Yep. And there's also a Chinese bronze beaker, or gu. That was all of them. Now that's the picture they did of the two officers. Okay, could be anyone. And that's just a snippet of what the FBI still have up. They do regular campaigns. I think the reward is like $10 million or something. It's just crazy, but it's still an ongoing investigation. Okay, so at the time, there was a lot of organised crime, and every time it's like almost all these mobsters get talked about as being maybe a suspect or knowing about it. And one of the ones was the late James Whitey Bulger. He was the head of one of the biggest sort of Irish-American crime gangs. So people thought if he didn't do it, he must know who did. But then he used to be an informant for the police. Can I go forward a bit? There's a couple of movies, if you want to know more about him. Johnny Depp, we won't talk about his woes, but he's fantastic playing Whitey Bulger in Black Mass. It gives you an idea of what it was like back then. He was a very violent man, and it's not surprising to hear, well, I should say he was on the run. They reckon, because he was an informant for the FBI, and then someone gave him a tip-off that he was going to be arrested, and he took off, and he was on the run for about 15 years until he was caught. And he was caught around the time I just finished researching a Cavalry and also the Garda Museum for my honours paper. And I got so excited that he'd been caught that I thought, maybe I need to do more about this topic. I couldn't believe how excited I was, because he'd been on the run for 15 years. And they thought, but even though he'd been arrested, there was nothing to link him to the crime. And eventually he was murdered in jail in 2018. He was like in his 80s by then. But because he'd killed so many people, he probably had a target on him. The Martin Scorsese movie from, I think, 2006, The Departed, the character Jack Nicholson plays, he looks so mean there, doesn't he? Reminds me when my dad would give me that deaf look. Anyway, his character, Frank Costello, is loosely based on Whitey Bulger. So if you kind of want to get a feel for kind of what it was like, Yeah, and so, and of course, because of that Irish connection, some people believe that the stuff was made it over to Ireland and that it was used for collateral for the IRA to buy arms. Like they might say, we don't have the money, but, you know, hold on to this painting, we'll be good for it. You know, that kind of thing. But then there are those. It's interesting, Anthony Moray, because, well, let me tell you what happened, right? So I was wanting to, I was researching the Cavalier's disappearance. And I wanted to do a comparative analysis. So I wanted to compare it just to show the fact that we don't have an art crime team here, but the US did, and I was doing a comparative analysis. So I wanted to see if I could speak to the director of security at the Garda Museum. And I thought, who am I, right? But anyway, well, I got to talk to him, and you would not believe this. Around the time that I got to speak to him on the phone, he had set up a website for a Cavalier because he'd read this newspaper article which said that police had stopped searching for it. So he wanted to crowdfund information. I couldn't believe it. So we were able to do like an info exchange. It was so amazing. So, and of course then we become Facebook friends as you do. Anyway, all right, so. And then, so the other crime mob who was potentially linked to it is, well, he passed away last year. He was in his 80s too, Robert. I don't know if you say Gentle or Gentili, but he was an Italian mobster. But again, his home got raided heaps of times by the FBI, but they never found the works. And then this, where do you hear this story? Let me find it. I've got to read it properly so I get it right. Okay, there was another crook called Vincent Ferrara. You know, I'm Italian, you know, anyway, it's okay. I suppose I should declare that my mum was from a Calabrian town called Oppodomamatino, which supposedly is a mafia stronghold, and my dad was from a Sicilian town, Mottacamus, which is another mafia stronghold, but hey, nothing to do with me. Okay, so to this, Vincent Ferrara said that one of his associates called Robert Donati confessed to him in 1990 that he had stolen the artworks so he could use it to sort of broker Ferrara's release from jail, but that he hid them in a secret location. But then he was found murdered in the trunk of a car without ever disclosing where the artwork was. Oh, so who knows, right? So there's so many different conspiracy theories with this thing. Interestingly enough, the FBI say they believe they know who did it. They think it was a group of local petty thieves, and many of them are now dead, but they can't find the artworks. Even the director of security, Anthony Moray, believes that they know who did it, but it hasn't led them to the artworks. And of course, the artworks are evidence, and without evidence, can't do anything. So who knows? But they live in hope that they will be returned. Okay, so let me see what I'm up to with my. Oh yeah, we did that one. So that's another snapshot of some of the other empty frames that are still just waiting. Yep. Okay. So a Cavalier self-portrait by Frans van Mieris. So this is still on the FBI art crime team's top 10 art thefts. You can Google it, FBI art crime team top 10 stolen art. I forget what number it is, maybe 8 or something, but it doesn't matter. At least it's on that, hey, you made the top 10. No, it's just joking. All right, so these were some of the headlines at the time. So this is June 2007, so 15 years ago this year. Okay, so and Frans van Mieris was a contemporary of Rembrandt, but he's not really so well known. Has anyone here heard of him?
Well, I'm Dutch, so...
Yeah, you would have heard of him. What was interesting, they reckon one of the reasons he fell out of favour, because I read this one of the few biographies about him, was that he liked to create little artworks. So that painting there, if I go to the next slide, it's literally 20 by 16. So you picture a magazine, that's how big, it's just small. And and of course that was perfect back in the day, in the 17th century, for customers who wanted portable artwork. Much easier to take home, than something bigger. But of course that fell out of favour, because apparently size does matter, so that fell out of favour. So that's one of the reasons they believe it was so easy to take and conceal, because I could have put it under my shirt, could have had it in my bag. Mind you, these days, if you go to the Art Gallery of New South Wales, which is where this was from, if you've got your bag's too big, you've got to check it in, right? But that wasn't always the case. And I should say, even with the Gardener and even with the Art Gallery of New South Wales, at the time, their standard of security was considered fine. It's not until things like this happen that they can see where things can be improved. So it's not to be too down on these, collecting institutions. Okay, so this is the piece All right, so I got to read the police report. This was the media release, but I got to read the police report, and they were saying that it would have been, I think it might have been the long weekend or the week after, but there'd been a storm. I think it was the long weekend because the police didn't get there till the Tuesday because of the public holiday. Because, it's the Rocks local area command. That's a big precinct. So what had happened was there was a really bad storm Saturday night. So when the police were doing their rounds, the security guards were doing their rounds, they couldn't be sure if the painting was in place because they were checking for water damage from the rain. And I actually was able to look up the weather for that evening, and it showed there was quite a bad storm in Sydney. So the first security guard on the Saturday night, he said he couldn't remember, he didn't really look out for it. And then the second security guard couldn't be sure he'd seen it either. So the police reckon it went missing sometime between Saturday night, the 9th of June, and Sunday, the 10th of June. But on the media release, it says it was sometime between 10 and 12 on Sunday. That's when they finally saw it and reported it. I'm just not going to worry about my notes. Okay. Now, I wanted to show you this picture. That was the wonderful late, great Edmund Capon, the former director of the Art Gallery of New South Wales. The reason I wanted to show this picture was you can see how big, that's a replica, that's a reproduction. Look how small it is. So just to give you an idea of just how tiny it was. Now, some people believe it was a crime, crime of opportunity, like it was just such an easy little piece to take. But the investigator I spoke to, because there was an independent investigator looking at the case, because the Art Gallery of New South Wales is a state institution and the police force is a state thing, that they thought there could be, what if it was an insider job or something like that? So they had a parallel investigation to the police investigation with a private investigator, and I got to speak to him on the hop, but I got to speak to him. And he said that the painting was secured by these specialised screws. So you needed to know that and to have the right kind of tool to remove them. I don't know. But, so one of the things I think that made it easy for whoever stole it was, you can see where I've circled, there's that little nook. The little James Fairfax gallery? I don't know if they still call it that. It's just this little nook. And at the time, there wasn't any CCTV kind of cameras up. But once you're in there, you're quite obscured, So, and it's away from the main sort of traffic thoroughfare. So it'd be really kind of easy to sort of be in there and be unseen. Now, the police, so it was discovered missing on the Sunday. The police didn't rock up, I think, until the Tuesday. Because you can understand, right? If they've got to investigate all these other crimes, this isn't necessarily a priority for them. They could be investigating a murder or something else. You know what I mean? So this is the thing when you don't have a specialised art crime team. The other thing was the investigator, he said that that weekend there'd been a big book sale, so there were a lot of people walking around with bags, so it could have easily been concealed. One of the other issues was that because the director was away overseas at the time, they wanted to let him know first, and they wanted to check the gallery to make sure it hadn't been moved, because sometimes artworks can be moved for legitimate reasons, like for repair or something. They wanted to, so I guess, rule out all those other things. So by the time they realised it's definitely missing. So by the time they alerted customs, it was like a Tuesday, Wednesday. So it gave, whoever stole, if they wanted to go overseas, they could have really gone overseas and there wouldn't have been any alerts on it. So who knows? Now, actually, what's my next slide? Yeah, we'll just go back. So when I was talking to this investigator, he said, because see, the policy for the New South Wales state government is they don't do rewards, right? Because they think it encourages crime, so they don't do in this case, right? So, and often, some thieves bank on there being a reward, but so they didn't kind of want to encourage that. But he said he was contacted by this ex-con who's now an art crime aficionado in the UK called Paul Turbo. Is it Hendy? Yeah, Paul Hobo Henry. I first heard of him when I saw a documentary in the Garda Museum, and he's a bit strange. Anyway, so he said that this guy had contacted him saying that he had information about where this painting could be. But he wanted, I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars of money before he would divulge. Anyway, he was able to see some of the emails that had been exchanged, and they were able to pinpoint that the emails seemed to have been generated from somewhere in northern New South Wales, but that wasn't really followed up. But so the investigators said to me, why don't you get in touch with this guy? And look, I have a confession to make. Although I look human, I'm actually a chicken. There was no way I was going to get in touch with that guy. He was too, woo. So anyway, it wasn't my job. I don't want to put my life in danger. He was, yeah. So who knows? Some people believe, that investigator believes it's still in Australia. Some believe it could be taken overseas. I know sometimes every now and then if I'm bored, I'll look on real estate online and I check out the interiors and I think, I wonder, well, you never know, right? Like I was watching Vampire Diaries. I was a bit slow to watch that series. And I'm looking at the scenes. I thought, hey, that's the concept that they were using. This was a crack up. I was taking photos they were using reproductions of the painting stolen in the Garda theft for the walls. I thought, what? I must write to the producers and say, hey, who did those reproductions? They're really good. But I was like, what? Anyway, so you never know. I just scanned the walls of the interiors. Or maybe I'll have to do that again tonight. I don't know. So, all right. Now, how much more to go?
10 minutes.
Oh, perfect.
But we want questions.
Yes, so 10 minutes for me, 10 minutes altogether, or you want me to stop in 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay, stop in 10, yeah, I can do that, perfect. I just wanted, absolutely, ask away. I wanted to say that the piece was insured, so they bought this painting, which was nearly 1 metre high and half a metre wide. And just to show you, which you can understand after that little one got stolen, see how big it is compared to McCabe compared to the other one, and just to show you side by side, so you can understand why they bought a bigger artwork. And of course, if that piece is ever recovered, it doesn't matter that they were paid out, it'll just go back to the gallery, but who knows. Okay, now, we don't need to read about that. Okay, and that was that article that Anthony Amore saw over in Boston that led him to do the website. Okay, now, I want you, I can't help it, it's how my brain works. Listen, people don't really know about this painting. It's been 15 years. I want you to go away from here with that image in your head, and if it helps, whenever you see David Spade, I should hypnotise you, whenever you see David Spade, I want you to think of a cavalier, okay? Because every time I see a cavalier, I think of David Spade. I can't help it, okay? So David separate, maybe, I don't know. So when you see David Spade, you've got to think of a cavalier, and you never know. One of you could be the ones who see it. Maybe you're here by fate. Who knows? All right, now, okay, 2016, the Springfield Art Museum. They had 7 of these, they had 10 of these prints actually, 7 were stolen. Andy Warhol, famous for the 1960s pop art movement, and these were created around in the 1960s. So it was in Springfield. Oops, wrong Springfield, I had to do that one. Of course, it was an obvious sight gag. Okay, Sunday afternoon, we all need sight gags. So this is the music, sorry, Akky, it's okay. I should have gone. So these are the prints. So I hope you had lunch because you might get a bit hungry. So these, yeah, they were all taken. Again, it was in April, just in 2016. They haven't been recovered. So it's been 6 years. So these were the other ones. I was only going to bring some cans of soup, but I thought, it's a bit much. And that was onion soup for last. Amazing, I know, right? There we go. Of course, another sight gag. We need, come on, who knows this? Okay, thank you. All right, that's, okay. So, yes, so sometime in the early hours of April 7, 7 of them were stolen, and they're valued at $500,000. Again, this is still an active investigation. And of course, the museum, and this was true also of the Garda and the Archive of New South Wales, the staff really felt a sense of loss, like they lost a member of their family. With the Garda Museum, more so, because this is an institution, man. Like, the locals love this museum. They love Isabella Stewart Gardner. And I remember watching this documentary, and people were just moved to tears at the fact that this artwork's gone. With the Art Gallery of New South Wales, I got to speak to a couple of staff members, and they had a reproduction of a cavalier in the office as a daily reminder that this piece is missing. Now, for this museum here, they came across this artwork by an artist called Lindsay Wildman, who reimagined Andy Warhol's work, and this is what it's like. It's uncanned. But hey, but it kind of, it helped the staff. They thought, well, this kind of helps us. And they decided that, this image makes you think about what a can of soup is, which is food. So they decided they would turn this negative into a positive, and they asked locals when they come to the museum to donate some unperishable goods, and that's what they did, and they gave that out to people in need. So, which was kind of a nice way to try to overcome that sense of loss by trying to turn it into something positive. And only this year, FBI, it's great to follow them on Instagram if you like true crime, and they had this. So the question said, what do these soup cans have in common? And then it says, they're all by Andy Warhol, and they were stolen from the Springfield Art Museum. So when you watch The Simpsons, I want you to think about this. And then it needs your help. So this whole big thing about using social media to try to crowdfund information. Okay. And then what I'm up to now. We don't worry about that. So all these things, these cases show how there's only speculation about what happened to them. They're still unrecovered. But sometimes a miracle happens. Now this painting, I just love the way they name these paintings. This is Man with Pipe at the Window. I mean, it's very obscure kind of title, isn't it? So this is another painting by Frans van Mieris. So this was stolen from a Romanian museum in 1968 and recovered 30 years later. How, may you ask? I'm glad you asked. So a guy from Romania travelled to the US to live, and he had 4 of these paintings, and he went to get them valued because 8 were stolen altogether in 1968. He had 4 of them, and the guy he could tell, I think, with this one of the special symbol of the museum, whatever, he thought, and then sure enough found out that they were stolen. The guy said he'd bought them from a gypsy back in Romania for $1,000, which probably could be true, because if things are out of the spotlight, they can change hands, you don't really know. And then they were finally reunited in the back of the museum. So 30 years after they were stolen. So it gives you hope. You never know that the other stuff might get recovered. And then what have I done here? And a lot of these pieces, there's a phrase that's been coined called Museum of the Missing, which is kind of a bit sad, but that's kind of what it is. There's a lot of stuff missing. And I think, oh yeah, there you go. I just thought I'd end it with that. There we go. All right. Good. Thank you. Thanks. Have a sip of water.
Wait. Okay. Sip of water, and it's question time. Questions. Come on, ask there.
Oh, hello. Thank you. I hope I have an answer. Go on.
Oh God, me too. Because my question is, how do you buy stolen art? Like,
okay,
so on Gumtree or something? Like, I don't know. Do you know?
How do you buy it? Is that how you buy it?
Yeah, like,
so
I guess,
it's very hard to do that
elements,
if
yeah.
it's a well-known piece, because you couldn't sell the concert and you couldn't sell the Rembrandt because it's just too well-known. But it's one of those Grace Cottington Smith who would know, So yeah, so it would be very hard. And then, like I was saying, you've got to have the documents to show that, what they call the provenance, which is the history of the painting, but more of that, it's the proof of ownership, to show that actually you do own it. This is the history of, who's had it in the past. Without that, you can't really sell it. That's why they say a lot of it is on the black market where, yeah. But yeah, you're right. They call it hot art. It's just too hot. You can't. And though sometimes thieves might wait a few years before they sell it, because while it's, while it's out of the spotlight. But certainly for the Boston ones, they'd be very difficult to try to sell any of that. So yeah, it's very hard. Yeah.
More questions there.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yep. Oh.
For me, oh my God. Well, in principle, there should be a record, and it has to do with the artist himself or herself. But an artist proof, in principle, I don't know, it's very different by the artist who says, I can have 3 or 4 artist proofs. And that means that it is that he or she can go and have the first edition. Look, I only can say yes, there is that loophole. I just hope that the artist, it's in principle, I don't know, if there's any of the printmakers here, how many artist proof do you make? Yeah. So the answer is, I suppose, that there are always loopholes to find to commit a crime.
Creative geniuses out there. That's right.
Yeah.
Who use their power for bad.
Yeah.
Sorry, snort. Oops.
More questions?
Oh, yes.
There's one there.
Excellent.
Wait.
Well, there's that thing about this, is it the Swiss storage things on the ports where they, I don't know if you saw Tenet, where they have the storage, the movie Tenet, where they have the storage facility where they said there's a lot of stolen art maybe kept there. Look, this is the thing, when it's unrecovered, it's hard to know, right? They can only go by what, when they recover stuff, to find out what were the motivations and what's done with the artwork. So that's why there's always these theories. So they reckon, like I said, there can be a black market, but you'd only get 10%. But hey, if something's worth, I don't know, a couple $100 million, I'm happy with 10%. Could do with that.
God, she's Italian, isn't she?
I'd say cash. How much for cash? No. Sorry. Oops, sorry, that's a bit of a stereotype, but it was true. My mum always did that, so I can say that from a lived experience. Thank you.
Now, more questions. Otherwise, I have a question.
Oh, okay.
I've got many questions. Vicky, there are two things. Well, first of all, how can we protect our collective cultural heritage? Because that's your next step, isn't it?
That's right. So say, for example, with the cases I was looking at with my research was when art galleries acquire art, and to make sure that they have those provenance checks in place, because say, for example, the galleries who purchased some what turned out to be looted Indian antiquities, there were some suspect things with the provenance, so which if they had, well, one of them did use a very good lawyer, and he suggested they didn't purchase it because he thought the provenance, the documents are a bit dubious. So, and then of course that led, say with the National Gallery of Australia, led to, it was unbelievable. It led to a whole review of the Asian art collection, and with new policies in place about provenance checks. So you've got to really make sure your paperwork's in order. And I would say, if you can't be 100% sure that it says what it says it is, that it's from this, you've got that proof of ownership, I wouldn't even touch it. Of course, the older something is, the harder it is to do that, because some things, if they're a found item and it's an ancient, there may not be any paperwork, So, so that's one thing, to have the provenance. The other thing is, some of our laws have been a bit lax. So say, for example, when Rio Tinto were doing the mining over in the Pilbara, and they blasted what turned out to be, was a sacred site, one of the Yukon Gorges, they didn't do anything illegal. It's what this academic called lawful but awful. So legally it held up, but obviously morally and ethically it didn't. So sometimes the laws can't keep up. They can't keep up with all these different situations. So the important thing is that in the case of the Art Gallery of New South Wales and also the Garda Museum, they learnt from these robberies. So the Garda, that was a wake-up call for a lot of museums. So these days, security guards have to be well-trained. You'll find, say, with Art Gallery of New South Wales, one of the biggest changes was there were more security guards around. Because some will argue that having CCTV won't necessarily prevent a crime, because if you wear a hoodie or something, not that I want to give, tips, but it might help them solve the crime after the fact. But some people, if they want it, they want it. They're not going to be deterred by that. But if they see a bunch of security guards, it's going to make it's going to make it a bit harder to try to take something. So the important thing is to learn from these, I guess, incidents when they happen.
But it's interesting about the laws, and I can then go back to the famous times the degenerate art and all the laws who are now actually very international laws coming into place to find those.
Yeah, so the degenerate, a lot of that was during the Nazi occupation. They did a couple of things. They were trying, obviously, Nazi Germany was trying to reimagine themselves as more classical kind of, have this classical image. And so they got rid of what they called degenerate arts. A lot of Picasso's other, sort of abstract stuff was just they burnt it. And then, of course, you had the systematic looting of galleries, and it's still being discovered to this day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's... and are there more questions? There's another question there.
How exciting. Where are you? I can't see.
Wait, just wait for that, then we can hear you a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you. So the AI is booming right now. So if I am a famous artist, so if someone use AI, learn my piece of work and create totally new based on my work, so is that kind of a crime?
Okay, this is interesting. There was this case with these two guys called John Drew and John Might. And see, it's not... So you're talking about someone doing like a copy of your artwork? It's not if they say it's a copy. It's when they try to pass it off as yours. That's when it becomes a crime. And then they have the fake documents. So, for example, this famous case, and you can read about them in a book called Provenance, John Drew and John Might. John Might was this guy, he used to love making reproductions of paintings, but he would say they were reproductions. So he, as some would say, he didn't have a vision for his own stuff. So he would just put ads in the paper saying, you like this Monet, you like this Rembrandt, I'll paint it for you for £40. He was from the UK. And then John Drew, who was this con man, he thought, I can use this guy. So then they started creating other works and passing it off as a famous artwork. And what he used to do, this was his genius, he used to donate money to, just say, a museum, for example, and then he'd get into the inner circle, he'd be allowed into the archives, and then he would get catalogues from galleries that no longer existed, and he would insert the details of this fake painting they just made. And then that would be the provenance. Oh, look, it's in this catalogue. Oh, the gallery's closed, but it's in here. Because he said, don't worry, they're looking for... This was his quote, they're looking along the lines of, they're not looking for people putting stuff in, they're only looking for people taking stuff out. So that was his he was just a genius like that. And who knows how many fakes are out there, because he was really cluey. He knew you can't pass this off unless you've got the provenance to go with it. So it's only a crime if you copy something and you say it's that original artist. But if you're saying this is, often you'll see artists say this is such and such after such and such. They'll say, this is my take on this painting. Well, it's okay, because you're still giving credit to the original. You're not trying to say you're that artist. Yeah.
Right.
There, that's right. There's a lot of those shows now where they do that. That's right.
Yeah.
And trying to authenticate the artwork. It's not always easy.
Yeah. Well, if there are no more questions, then I think I'm going to thank you, Vicky.
You're welcome.
And we have not a standing ovation, but can we clap her to say thank you very much?
See why I like to research it. It's a very interesting topic, so yeah.
Not only that, her topic will be continued, so maybe next year we have another story about it. Thank you for coming.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Have fun at the fair. Well done.
Yeah, it was good.
Well done.
Thank you.